Up next is Lyndon Johnson of Think Differently, of course, and he will again talk about lean startup approaches to public relations.
Hi, good evening. Before we start, just wanted to ask for some perceptions on public relations, what it is, whether you've had good experiences, some of the things that have worked and haven't worked. What does everyone think public relations is? Getting the word out. Okay. Propaganda, good. Bad media, okay. Perfect. I'm glad to hear that only one of the definitions involves media. It's certainly a portion of it, but far too often it gets pigeonholed as being only media. So I started a company a year ago that helps small businesses and startups to use public relations and marketing to grow their businesses. Essentially, it's trying to get all of the things that Stuart and Peter are looking for and avoiding the extreme risk. And generally in traditional public relations, there's an awful lot of extreme risk in public relations, especially for early stage small businesses and startups. So the first thing I want to do is play you a video. Okay. If it doesn't play it,
I'll play it, but we have no audio.
well, so it's Steve Jobs essentially explaining that the most important thing about marketing is values. It's about getting across what you're about rather than selling bits and bytes of products. And in incredibly competitive market spaces, your product won't stand out. What will attract the early adopters, the early customers, it will also adopt VC funding, angel funding, is what you stand for. This was the start of the presentation he gave to the Apple board just after he'd returned to the company, launching the Think Different campaign. And he explains about that it's not about making boxes. They make boxes very well, but other people make boxes. What's really going to differentiate them and companies like Nike and other big name brands about what they stand for. And that the Nike campaign, Just Do It, was about promoting athletes, about promoting performance. It wasn't about selling running shoes, about whether the soles were better, the gel soles were better, or they were made from better equipment, better materials. It was about promoting athletic achievement, and that was what they based their business around, selling running shoes. So, marketing is effectively about values, what Steve Jobs says. But I think he was wrong. That's quite a big claim given the fact that he's architected one of the most successful companies ever over the last 20 years, probably ever. Companies now flying high. It has a new range of phones which are selling well 9 million in the first 3 days. But I think what he actually meant, they seem to put, Apple has a habit of putting an S after everything now. Maybe this was the start of it. But actually, marketing is about value. Marketing is about value. Public relations is about values. So, we've got some definitions of what public relations is about, what people think it's about. A lot of people think it's about media. If you go to a regular PR company, they'll tell you that you can spend thousands of dollars a month and you can buy a media relations campaign. They'll go out and they'll pitch your product and your business to journalists to try and get you coverage. When in reality, it's everything that you do to build a relationship between your organization and its audiences. Public relations, this is a definition by the PRSA, which is surprising given so few companies that are members actually use this as their working definition for public relations. It was crowdsourced in 2012 by members, and this is now what the new definition 2.0 online social media world is. But most companies only see doing this, a strategic communication process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between organisations and their publics, has been done via the media. They'll charge you an awful lot of money for it, but they don't actually help you to build those relationships. They're building relationships with journalists on your behalf, and you're paying them to do it. Once you stop working with them, your relationship disappears generally. The definition of marketing: everything you do to leverage the relationships built via public relations activity. It's using the value, it's communicating the value, why they should choose your product over competitors. Building on the fact that they're likely to be interested in buying your product or service because you have the same value set. You're coming from the same place. People bought Apple products not because they were more expensive, not because they were better designed. They built it because Apple presented a better way of doing things. It was the cool thing to do. Cool people use Macs. And that's how they built the brand. People wanted to try those same values that Apple was telling them they got from their products. In reality, they were simply buying another version of something that's already been available for years. The iPod might be slightly different than the iPhone, but in the early days, Macs were Macs, and nowadays there are lots of mobile phones that look an awfully lot like iPhones, but they still continue to be the brand that people want, mainly because of the value that they talk about, the value that comes with buying their products. Marketing is also about the 4 Ps: price, product, promotion, and place. They're all fairly self-explanatory, but what a lot of people do for public relations is actually promotion. They're not actually building a relationship, they're pitching their product. They're trying to tell you why you should buy it, but using the product as the way to do it. They're not actually trying to build a mutually beneficial relationship with an audience. And when you're a small company, an early stage company, one of the key things is about getting that buy-in from your customers. The best way to get to revenue, the best way to show market traction, the best way to show to an investor that you have a fit with your product in a market, there's a demand in the market, is build relationships with people. You get them in, they get to see that you have the same value set, you have something that you can solve a problem, and you get them to hook in that way. Then you demonstrate the product to them. They like the product, and they're more likely to buy from you than they will do from a competitor. Another definition which is used an awful lot in PR, misunderstood by a lot of startups, is value proposition. A lot of entrepreneurs think that the value proposition is something that they come up with based on what they think they're solving for the audience. When in reality, it's what makes you valuable to your audiences. So when you've got an early stage business and you've got a product you're looking to take to market, ask your customers, build those relationships, get honest feedback. What do they see as being the selling point for the product or service that you have? Because then that becomes a value proposition to that audience. You can use that to communicate the value which they've already told you is what they see in your product back to them when you ask them to buy it. So think about the value proposition, think about what your audience, what your customer is looking for, whether it's a VC as an audience, whether it's a journalist as an audience, or whether it's actually somebody that's going to buy a product or service. It's what they see in it as value rather than what you think it is. Another term that gets misused is brand. People say they're launching brands, they're building brands. You can't really launch a brand because the brand doesn't exist without customers. The brand is what your customers and prospects say about you. It's what they tell other people about your business based on your values, based on the relationship you have with them, based on everything that they see from you say and do in the early stages, what they see about your products and the way in which you communicate. Social media. It's something that a lot of small businesses and startups do. They're told it's an essential piece of promoting their business. When in reality, it has some value, but you have to understand what the value is to be able to actually use it for benefit for the business. And whilst some people think social media is a thing, it's a commodity, actually it's just a series of platforms, a series of pieces of software that are posted online that enable you to communicate the messages with your target audience. On its own, it has no value at all. It's the people at the other end of it, the people that you're communicating with that have the real value. And there's a myth in traditional public relations. It's one of the things that we work with a lot with companies, is that awareness is what people see as being the outcome of public relations. But actually awareness doesn't equal outcomes. Just because people know about you doesn't mean that they're going to buy your business. It's a new stage business. It's the outcomes that you want to get to. It's the milestones, whether it's getting your first 10 customers, whether it's selling your first 100 products, whether it's getting your second round of customers from the first 10 that you've sold to, they get a good experience. They talk about business, product, service, your brand, your business, to people that have shared values and shared interests that might be people that buy your products. But PR companies talk about awareness as if you get awareness and everything's solved. And Peter was talking earlier on about causing premature scaling. One of the biggest problems for PR with small businesses is they get a piece of coverage in Mashable or TechCrunch or whatever magazine it is that's relevant to your audience. They get a heap of inquiries come in and they can't manage it. They can't produce the goods which they're trying to sell quickly enough, therefore it's late, it's delayed. So people get disillusioned. Is it actually going to happen? You sold them this promise that you were going to sell them something if they were interested. When they're interested, you can't cope with it. So awareness isn't necessarily a good thing for small businesses and startups. There's a sort of 300,000, just skip by there. Say you're trying to get coverage in a publication that has 300,000 subscribers, 300,000 weekly subscribers or page impressions people visit. How many people do you think you're actually talking to? Shout out some guesses.
1%.
Okay. Anybody else? Any ideas?
3%.
Sorry?
3%.
3%. Okay. It's worse than that. There's a sales rule that if you do a direct mail piece or you send out a piece of sales collateral, that says if all the people that you send it out to, 5% will actually see the email. The 5% that see it, 5% of that 5% will open it. 5% of that 5% will read it. 5% of that 5% will actually be intrigued enough to want to do something about it. And then 5% of that 5% will actually do something about it. 5% of that 5% are actually likely to become customers. So I don't know what that is, but it's a fairly small number. Calculated, you saw that drop by 7.5 people. When you're targeting a publication with 300,000 people that goes out every day, Monday to Friday, and that's just Monday to Friday, I didn't factor in weekends, it's just too complicated. You're talking to 7.5 people. And yet people use PR companies to send out something to journalists that write for magazines and publications that have 300,000 readers. But only 7.5 people are actually in the position where they could become customers. So the actual number of people that you could convert is 5%, 7.5. So you've got a bit of a problem because you can't make it relevant to those 7.5 people if you're trying to talk to an audience of 300,000 people. So what is effective PR? Well, we think that effective PR has 4 components to it. If you get these things right, you eliminate the extreme risk or the chances of extreme risk. You reduce that risk significantly by getting 4 key components right. And that's what we work on with customers, whether they're entrepreneurs, whether they're startups, whether they're small businesses, to help get these 4 components right so that when you send something out about your business, you have a much better chance of 7.5 out of 300,000. The first one is the right audience. If you don't know who your audience is, everything else goes out the window. You have to know who your audience is. And there's a belief amongst a lot of small businesses these days with the web and social media, everyone is your audience. And whilst they might be, there's a chance that you could snag somebody by getting in front of everyone. Just showing the likelihood of getting that million, if you hit 1 million people, the number of people that you're likely to actually have that are interested enough to want to get in touch, let alone have the conversation and spend money with you. To understand your audience, spend a lot of time figuring out who they are. You want to know what they think, how they speak, the words that they use, where they get influence from, who people that they trust. If somebody says to them, this is perfect for what you're trying to solve, fixing the business, they will trust them because they're important, they're an audience that you need to look at because you can get to those people in multiple ways, and the influencers or the people that actually sign off the purchase orders or sign the checks are as important as the person that you actually deal with that makes the agreement to sell. So audience is the first thing, and if you have multiple audiences, then you need to segment the audiences so that you can actually understand what the requirements are for each of those audiences before you start to build a PR campaign. Just missed one there, but it's the right message. If we can go back. Okay, right message. So once you've understood who your audience is, one of the key things is not wasting the opportunity. Once you get in front of a VC firm, you need to understand what they want to hear. If you go in, as Pete was just saying, with a 40-page business plan, and they're looking for a one-page lean canvas, it's an awful lot of work to put a 40-page business plan together, but you're probably saying the wrong things. You're probably using the wrong words. So understand who the audience is helps you to understand what you need to say to them when you get in front of them. That's going to either get them to take interest in your business, they might be looking at you for funding, or to actually test the product, or to ask their friends about the product, or to actually want to spend some cash with you. So I spend lots and lots of time when you've got an early stage business, a new product going to market, on the right message. If you get the message wrong, it's a wasted opportunity building the relationships with the people, with the audience that could become your customers. This is always overlooked. Companies think that the minute they have a product or a service ready to go to market, that's the right time to tell the world about it, or to tell their audience about it. But in reality, it's probably the worst time. If you understand the audience, you understand when it's the right time to tell them about it. There's no point trying to sell them a $100,000 piece of software at the end of the budgeting year where they've got no money. When they're thinking about budgeting, about what they need, and you can demonstrate from building the relationship and understanding what they are, what the problems they solve, understanding the value proposition you need to communicate to them when the right time is. When they're making plans to spend lots of money on an IT investment, or when they're looking for a new car, or when they're looking to buy a new condo. You need to get the message to them at that perfect time. We can help companies sort that out, which is one of the biggest, most overlooked things. It's one of the biggest problems with marketing PR campaigns. People get everything else right, but then do it at the wrong time. Selling Christmas cards in January, you sell it at 10% of the price you could have sold it 3 weeks ago. But the fourth piece is the right delivery mechanism. Is it the media? Do you need to get a piece in an industry journal if you're selling B2B? Is there a magazine that if you get a journalist to write about it, is actually going to have an impact on your business because you know that the audience is right and that's what they read? You know what their perception of the value proposition needs to be. You know what you need to say to them. You know when the right time is. So you arrange to get the message to them, but then you send them an email, or they want a text message, or you send them a flyer, when actually what they want is something online, a Facebook message or a Facebook page. So the right delivery mechanism is really important as a small business because it can make everything fall apart. If you get any of the four pieces wrong, you've got a real problem with the campaign. The thing is, if you go through this process and you build all of these aspects deliberately, you can look back at the campaign and you can figure out what went wrong. The standard approach with traditional PR with a lot of agencies is that they'll just start all over. They'll do a new press release, they'll try and spin it a different way, they'll try a different time because you've already tried once, but no, I'm giving it another go. If you can build a campaign like that, you can dissect it. You can figure out, was the audience right, the message was right, the timing was right, but we just didn't send it in the right way. It's 21 to 25-year-olds that wanted to see it on Facebook and we sent them a letter in the post. You can actually break down what went wrong, you can fix it, and you can go back and you can try again. One of the big truisms now about the world in which we live in, where everything is real time, if people don't see it, They don't see it. You can launch something, it can not get you the outcome that you want, but you can go back and look at it and say, we know what didn't work, and try it again. And in a majority of times, you won't have missed the opportunity. It's finding the right opportunity again after you missed the original window. But by dissecting it, you can actually save time and money, and you can actually rebuild the campaign so that it delivers the outcome that you want. Next slide. And the other thing from the lean methodology is validate it. Validate everything. Part of the PR is building relationships with people, is asking questions. What do you think? Is this right? Do A/B testing. Here are 2 versions of a press release. Talk to journalists that you know. Get to know the journalists that really matter. Don't build a media list that's 100. Build a media list that is 6, and there are 6 people that really matter that you build a relationship with. You can say to them before you actually launch the product, this is what we're doing. What does it look like? Are you interested? What if we focused on something else? Is that more interesting than the angle that we've come up with? You can actually get validation, or you can find out that it's not going to work before you make a big fanfare about it and fix it before it goes out. The other thing is think differently. My company's called Think Differently, partly because I'm a huge Apple fan. I think what Steve Jobs did as a marketeer was incredible. He ignored a lot of the conventions. He didn't do the things the way that every other company did it. He wanted to do something different. He wanted to make the company stand out, not only for the product, but also for the way in which they communicated. And I wanted to try and build a company for small businesses and startups that takes that same approach. It's a noisy world out there. I mean, it's one of the things that Steve Jobs made in the video. It's difficult to be heard in a really noisy environment. It was noisy 20 years ago when I started PR. It's 100 times more noisy now. So standing out is even more difficult. And you have to think differently. Do what other people aren't doing. Think about your audience and understand what they want. In the majority of cases, people marketing to them aren't doing what they want. They're doing the same things. They're sending out messages, hoping people latch onto it. They're going after the 300,000, hoping they find the 7.5. It was interesting to find Where's Waldo. That's essentially media relations. Where's Waldo is essentially the Where's Waldo approach to PR. It's going out to so many people hoping that you actually find Waldo with the right message at the right time, by the right platform, and he's the right person for your business. Just tell you a little bit about the business and how we think differently about PR. What we do when we work with startups is we don't do retainers. They're unethical, they don't work, they make getting good advice cost prohibitive for small businesses. You think that you start with $2, $3, $5, $10,000 a month for a regular PR retainer. It's out of the reach of most PR companies, even the good, well-funded ones. It's still spending money that you could spend, far more effectively in business doing other things to help you to get to revenue, to help you to get the business on a solid footing. We work on an hourly basis. So if you have a problem, we talk about the problem, we tell you whether we can help you or not, and if we think we can help you, we set out a plan how we can do it, but it's based on an hourly plan. So that you actually have the option to opt in or opt out. You decide what you want to do, what your skill set means you're able to do, what you have as resource inside the organisation, and you can stop at any time. So we're about giving control back to small businesses and startups and making PR and marketing accessible to them and also effective, helping them hit the landmarks and the milestones that they have to get to revenue, to build a sustainable business, to find out whether they can turn it into something by VC funding that's going to help them to get to the next stage in the business and turn a small business into a medium-sized business and beyond. But if you're interested in PR, if you've tried PR before and had bad results, come talk to me afterwards. If you have any questions, I always give a free hour as an introduction to every person that we work with, because if I can't help you, I want to know enough to be able to tell you I can't help you, because I don't want to take money if I can't deliver a benefit to the business. The website is there. My email is lyndon@thinkdifferently.ca. I always put my phone number on there, and people say you shouldn't because you get random people phoning you in the night, but it's there, and please feel free. And I do get people phoning me in the middle of the night, and it's fine. The positive effect is far better than the negative effect. And if you're on Twitter, then I'm at think_Linden. We just want to help small businesses to get a good grounding in basics for public relations and marketing that help them hit their milestones and turn them into profitable, established businesses.
Thanks very much.